Hello, and welcome to the Patent Literacy Symposium and this session, Structured Literacy Among English Learners, What Every Teacher Should Know, with Dr. Elsa Cardenas Hagan. My name is Kirsten DeRoche, and I'm joined by my colleague from the Patent East Office, Kim Jenkins. We're excited to facilitate this session for everyone. Before we start, we have a few housekeeping items to review. You can access the presenter handouts for this session, the presenter bio, and the conference schedule on the patent website, and the link is provided in the chat. Let's just get me to drop that there if I can. Oops, there we go. And just as a reminder, this session is being recorded. It will be 75 minutes in length, which will include a 15-minute question and answer period. To access closed captioning, please click on the icon CC Live Transcript that's on your Zoom control panel. If you experience technical difficulties, please go to the technical support guides area above the schedule on the symposium page. Because this is a webinar, microphones have been muted and your video features have been turned off. We would love for you to tweet out or share on social media all that you're learning from the Literacy Symposium. The hashtag for the symposium is hashtag PatentLit2022. And now, would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Elsa Cardenas Hagan.
Thank you so much. And I'm delighted to be here today with each of you to talk about structured literacy amongst English learners, what we all should know, what every educator should know. And I will begin with why should every educator know about structured literacy? Well, as we look at our demographics in the United States and we think about, what are the demographics? What are our reasons and our rationale for implementing structured literacy? Let's take a look at language and speech development and link language to literacy. So let's go through. We know the demographics of English learners. We have more than 5 million English learners attending public schools in the United States. Did you know that Spanish is the most common language of these speakers? We're getting close to 80% of our English learners speaking Spanish. Arabic is the second most common language, with less than 3% of the students speaking Arabic. Our nation's report card, you've probably heard of that, the NAEP. It shows that this population lags behind, right, in reading, behind their monolingual English-speaking peers. Now, I want to dispel some myths today. And I want to show you and demonstrate to you the body of evidence that we have for implementing structured literacy amongst English learners. When did it begin? Well, by the year 2000, for monolingual English speakers, we had the National Reading Panel Report. That came out in the year 2000, and that's where all of you learned about, here are some essential components. And you learned about phonological awareness. You learned about implementing phonics and focusing on fluency, all the while building students' vocabulary and comprehension skills. We didn't have enough information at the time because by the year 2000, the United States Congress, they allotted $30 million to begin the Biliteracy Research Network. And so it wasn't until the year 2006 that Developing Literacy in Second Language Learners, the report of the National Literacy Panel on Language Minority Children and Youth, that could be used. And that was published in 2006. Now, I'd like to demonstrate to you what is the same and what's different about these reports. Let's take a look. So remember I told you the National Reading Panel, that report talked about those key areas. And the next thing we had was the National Literacy Panel on Language Minority Children and Youth. What's the same? What's different? What was different was, you have to adjust instruction to meet the needs, those language and literacy needs of your students who are categorized as English learners. However, those 5 components, phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, those components of literacy are also essential for them. However, every educator should think about how to use this native language as an asset and use that native language to support second language development and second language literacy development. And it was very clear from this report on language minority children and youth that the cross-linguistic features are an excellent resource. Something else that you might not remember from this report is it was demonstrated that students with native language literacy skills will perform higher, right, in that second language literacy than those students who were only instructed in English. So these were some key findings after doing a review of all the research that existed and was also high quality research. So as we look here, then, we continued the work. And then we have what are called these Institute of Education Sciences practice guides. Every educator should know about the Institute of Education Sciences practice guides, right? And you can just even put in there in your search engine, Institute for Education Sciences practice guides, and you'll get a whole library. Why are these so important? The United States Department of Education, the research arm, Institute of Education Sciences, reviews the research. This one was on teaching academic content and literacy to English learners in elementary and middle school. And some of the research findings, so it'll give you research findings that had strong evidence, moderate evidence, or minimal evidence. And it's very easy read, right? So here on this one, it's saying you should be teaching a set of academic vocabulary words intensively across several days in instructional activities. You should integrate oral language and written language into that content area teacher. So in other words, we are language teachers, we are literacy teachers, and we are content teachers. And so that has very strong evidence, and I do recommend that you read this practice guide. Then we had, by the years 2017, another national report promoting the educational success of children and youth learning English, promising futures. And this panel was arranged by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Guess what looks similar to the previous reports? Yes, to develop literacy amongst English learners, your instruction needs to be explicit in those literacy components, which include, once again, phoneme awareness, phonics, oral reading fluency, vocabulary, reading comprehension, and what was added here was writing. Of course, when we think about literacy, it's listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But getting more specific, within this report, it really specified, once again, developing an academic language during the content area instruction. Look familiar to the IES practice guide? Provide explicit instruction in literacy components. Looks familiar with the National Reading Panel and the National Literacy Panel report on language minority children and youth? Looks familiar, huh? And it added, really making sure that for these students, we're providing a lot of visuals and visual supports and verbal supports to make that core content comprehensible. Additionally, encouraging these students to have these peer-assisted learning opportunities. Students are willing to, have that opportunity to work with other peers, and that way they can engage more in language and in literacy. Every educator must capitalize on the students' home language, their background knowledge, and use what they bring to the table, those cultural assets. Those are assets, and we're going to take it from that framework. Additionally, this report recommended that we screen for language and literacy challenges and that we monitor the progress. When we screen, then that gives us a lot of information about students who could use additional support. So it's saying provide that small group academic support, right, in literacy and that English language to these students. So these are national reports that you can depend upon that are sponsored by the United States Department of Education, the Institute of Education Sciences, and the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. So In one of our studies, another resource that I want to share with you, I just completed this project called MTSS for ELS, the model demonstration project that was sponsored by the United States Department of Education and the Office of Special Education Programs. And we were one of 3 national projects. And we have what are called literacy briefs to help you know what are some key ideas that you should be implementing and that you should know about as you work with these students in the content areas. So one brief here is meeting the needs of English learners with and without disabilities, looking at that multi-tiered instructional systems for English learners. And what are some features there? High quality, differentiated language. We're going to talk about that, knowing the level of language and first language and second language of the students that we serve. And understanding that continuum, the language continuum and the literacy continuum. That's your job as an educator, so that you can bring in the appropriate scaffolds for the students to meet their linguistic and their academic needs. But all the while, we want students engaged. And you see here that we recommend those culturally relevant principles applied to instruction and assessment. I'm not saying that these principles are going to teach them to read, but what I'm saying is that when you bring in these principles, these students become more engaged and motivated to read and to learn. So we want these meaningful opportunities also for students to have opportunities in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And we're going to use that native language as support during instruction. Look familiar to some of the other reports and their recommendations, right? And using that knowledge of native language for that second language. The website is mtss4els.org. But also there, what we have is a way, a framework of looking at that multi-tiered, implementation systems of support, where tier 1 is the general education, tier 2 is that small group instruction, tier 3 is very intense work for students who might be serviced in special education or maybe even still through general education, but it has more intensity. But what looks different? What looks different is, notice, basic, intermediate, and advanced. We are going to be taking into consideration their language proficiency levels. Are they at the very early stages, very basic? Are they at intermediate? Are they advanced? And we consider that as we work with the students across the tiers. And then look right there in the blue, CLRT, bringing in those culturally, linguistically responsive teaching practices. So this is a new framework to think about as you work across the tiers with these students who are English learners. Another resource that I want to share with you from our project is a literacy implementation rubric, really looking at how these multi-tiered systems, right, for the English learners. And there's a tool on there when you go to the website that has a rubric so that you can self-reflect and reflect on your school, your campus, your district, and how they implement and bring in all the special considerations that are necessary for English learners. We have a scoring worksheet and also an action plan that you can use. So today, what I did is really give you the body of evidence for structured literacy, these reports that you should know about and read. They're not difficult to read, and some extra resources from some recent studies that we have completed. So when we look at reading, each of you, I'm sure, is very familiar with the simple view of reading. It doesn't mean that it really is simple, but it's trying to show that when we are approaching literacy, we should be approaching it in a very comprehensive manner. That we want to make sure that students have additional skills for decoding and reading accurately, while also having those language skills to get to that level of skilled reading. If I don't have decoding and those foundational skills, and I have language comprehension, I'm not going to be a skilled reader because I still need those foundational skills. Or if I have wonderful language comprehension, right? and I didn't have decoding, oh, not good, right? But if I have decoding without language comprehension, that also isn't going to get me to be a skilled reader. So we want to be comprehensive in that approach. Dr. Hollis Scarborough, through her reading rope, really expanded upon this idea of the simple view of reading and said, you know what, to get to those foundational skills, those word recognition skills, you must have these other skills, phonological awareness. You must understand how print works so that you can decode and read those words correctly. And that affects also how well you're able to spell. And you must recognize the words, right, that don't follow the patterns and that you have to learn by sight. But we want to become increasingly automatic with that. But all the while, we want to be capitalizing and building upon the students' background knowledge, building their vocabulary, helping them understand the language structures while understanding the literacy structures, right? And putting two and two together. Our students need opportunities to make inferences and to reason and to become strategic about their reading. So that word recognition becomes more automatic and that language comprehension more strategic to get us to skilled reading. So that simple view of reading is not really so simple. So structured literacy, a new term that was came about in 2014 by the International Dyslexia Association to really put a label upon this very comprehensive approach to literacy. But the foundation of structured literacy is built upon language. So every language in the world has a sound system, the speech sound system that we call phonology. Every system in the world, right, has words, right? And those words have meaning. We can call that semantics. You might call it vocabulary. But also, as we look at vocabulary and vocabulary building, we have these meaningful word parts called morphemes, and those carry meaning and are very, very, very important for developing vocabulary, not in one language, not in two languages, but 2, 3, or 4 languages. But as we're learning, right, how to read, we're not only paying attention to the phonology, to the semantics, to the morphemes, but also to how those words are used, the syntax, to create a cohesive sentence and then paragraphs. And the writing system, looking at things such as, spelling. So we're going to look at spelling and grammar and that composition. But our students need to understand that spoken discourse and that written discourse for deep reading and effective written communication. But we can't forget that there's other cognitive skills. Touch this part of your brain, the frontal lobes. These are our attention skills, our concentration skills, but also our skills for kind of organizing information, holding information, manipulating it. Our students need to have attention and concentration and reasoning skills and planning and organization skills to be great learners. So we can't discredit those cognitive skills that really help to promote literacy skills. But what is structured multiliteracy? I propose to you today that it is that understanding of the structure of 2 or more languages using those cross-linguistic features as a strategy. So I know the phonology in 2 or more languages. I know the orthography in 2 or more languages, the syntax, the morphology, the semantics, and I understand how that language works and how literacy works. But how it works within, right, that culture, within those unspoken rules about how we use language and how we use literacy. So bringing in those culturally, linguistically responsive practices, and of course, those other aspects of cognition that I spoke to you about in the previous slide. So let's get started. What would this look like in your classroom? What I'm asking you to do today is, no matter what you're teaching, that you're paying close attention to the student's ability to process the sounds of their native language and second language, to be able to understand those words and the word meanings, to be able to use the morphemes as excellent strategies for expanding vocabulary, for helping with spelling and writing. and to explicitly teach word order so that students understand the function of words and they're able to create beautiful sentences, which then lead to beautiful paragraphs. But do not forget that you must bring in the multiple opportunities for language use, and you must teach the spoken and unspoken rules. And what that means under pragmatics, for example, is that I have to know how a conversation works, how you initiate it, how you maintain a topic. I have to know things like your idioms and your sayings, both at the local, regional, and national level. I need to know my audience, and I need to know the differences between the social registers of language and the academic. And you're going to teach me about that. And I'm going to know when to use those different forms of language within the classroom and outside of the classroom. So I have to make sure that I'm embedding language as I'm working in literacy. So how can I do that? First steps, I want you to know what's typical development. So in my native language, in general, a young baby, when they're born, by the time they're 3 months, they coo. At 6 months, they babble, ba, 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 ba. They weren't really telling you mama. They were just covering their lips. But by the time they're 12 months of age, they're speaking their first words very clearly. When they're 2, they can put 2 words together, right? And speak in 2-word phrases. When they're 3, little 3-year-olds speak in 3-word phrases. And we see them use things like pronouns, like I, me, you, mine, 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 mine. Remember that stage? Some adults are still at that stage. At 4 words, they speak in 4-word sentences, right? So now we're seeing, oh, beautiful. They've added articles and perhaps adjectives. 5-year-olds speak in 5-word sentences, 6-year-old in 6-word sentences, 7-year-old in 7-word sentences. And by the time they're 8, it's about 8-word sentences. So as adults, we might use 8 or 9 words on average. But what's important is to be monitoring that language development as you're developing that literacy development. So for the students who are learners, you're not only going to monitor native language, but what about the second language? These were developed, this second language acquisition model was developed by Krashen and Terrell in 1986. And let's just talk about what would pre-production look like. When I've got those English learners and they just come into my classroom, guess what? They're mainly nonverbal, but they are taking in receptively the language and they're pointing to things. Then they move to early production. Now they're willing to risk with you and they're speaking in 1 or 2-word phrases. Speech emergence, we're so excited because now they're using simple sentences to get their message across. In intermediate, now they're using more complex sentences. They've got conjunctions in there, right? They've got prepositional phrases. And we say it takes 5 to 7 years to get to the advanced language proficiency level, whereby you have the excellent vocabulary, excellent syntax, excellent language structures, and you can't really tell the difference between a monolingual English speaker and this speaker that is speaking English as their second language. So as they're developing their native language, what happens to these students is they're also developing their second language. And so we have to monitor both native language and second language development. I'm going to give you a tool. This is what I want you to do. Think right now in your head for some students that you were worried about this past semester. And you didn't see them progressing along in their language skills like their peers. So this is what you do about it. Get those 1, 2, or 3 students you're concerned about and collect 50 utterances to make a formal language sample. And what you do is you ask them, what did they do over the weekend? What's their favorite movie? Tell me about their favorite book. Tell me about your favorite hobby. And you ask open-ended questions. Then what you're going to do is you're going to write down word for word everything the student said to you. You count how many words was that when they responded the first time? How many words was it the second time, the third time, the fourth? Until you get your 50 utterances. And I know you don't have much time. So this is what I suggest to you. On a Monday, Spend 2 to 3 minutes with the student asking some open-ended questions. Write down to where you get 10 responses. Tuesday, do the same thing, another 10. Wednesday, another 10. Thursday, another 10. And by Friday, I've got my formal sample, 50 responses back to me. Now I'm going to count. How many words was that? This is the grand total of words. I divide that by 50 to get the score called MLU. What does MLU stand for? Mean length of utterance. Then I become diagnostic and prescriptive. I'm not going to be incidental in working on their language skills. I'm going to be explicit and systematic. And I'm going to have a plan for expanding their language use. So let's take a look. I want to show you this one. This was a sample, and this actually was a very young child that I was able to work with. And the child was needing to get ready for kindergarten year, and it was the summer. And I asked the child things like, "Oh, can you tell me about your favorite book?" The child answers, "No, like." "Oh, okay, books." And the child just repeated, "Book." "Tell me about your favorite movie." "Like movie." "Which one's your favorite? Describe it to me." Notice my open-ended questions. Child says, "Batman." "Happens in the movie Batman?" Another open-ended question. "Car, vroom." I gave the child credit for saying vroom. I knew that that meant fast. The car goes fast. "Who else is in the movie Batman?" "Robin." "Tell me all about Robin." "Robin friend." So we go on until I get my 50 utterances, right? And if we look right here and I count up how many words was that and what was the average, I count up the total number, right? And then I divided it by 50 and I got 1.4. So this child's 3. They're supposed to be speaking in 3-word sentences, right? I'm sorry, this child's actually 5 and is only speaking in 1.5 words. So that's like in between a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, right? So I needed to get the child to 5 words, and I wanted the child to be kindergarten ready. So I looked right here and I saw some 2-word responses. No, like movie, like bowl, jump ball, win game, get towel. Oh, that gave me an idea. If I were to add a pronoun such as I could get him to say, I like movie, I jump ball, I win game, I get towel. And that's exactly what I did. We're going to start on that preposition I. It's all about you. So we started on I, and then I did he and she. And within about 3 weeks, I had, guess what? 3-word sentences. Then I decided, okay, you know what else is missing? I like bowl. There's no articles. I like the bowl. I win the game. So I added things like a and the and an. Another couple of weeks, I'm at 4-word sentences. Now we're in the month of July. Saw the child in June, now it's July. So I wanted to get to 5 words before kindergarten. So I decided, we could add some adjectives, but not just all adjectives. I'm going to be real explicit. We'll add color adjectives. I want the blue ball. I want the red apple. I want the yellow banana. Then I added size adjectives. I want the big pencil. I want the little pencil. Now it's August, and the student went from 1.4 words in June to 5-word sentences ready to go. So what I did was I was explicit and systematic in my approach. I wasn't only using sentence stems that we typically want to use, and that's okay. But I wanted to get at the root of the problem. What do they have now, and how can I systematically add to it? So I considered adding pronouns. I added articles. My adjectives could describe. If I wanted more complex sentences, I could add those conjunctions and prepositional phrases, add the adverbs, and creating all those opportunities for use. That is being diagnostic and prescriptive in developing their language skills. And then we're going to be diagnostic and prescriptive in developing their literacy skills. So I hope this will be a good tool that you'll consider using. So language. You've heard me talk about that. Of course you have. So as we look at language, the phonology is a component of language that helps your reading, because that's going to help you with your phonological awareness skills, your ability to put those letters and sounds together, your ability to decode and read, and certainly your spelling ability. Vocabulary helps you to listen to the teacher and understand, but it also helps you as you're reading and builds upon that fluency and comprehension and written language. Syntax, how those words work. Did you know that syntax can actually help my reading fluency? Because I can already predict what kind of word is next. And it helps me, of course, with my listening and reading comprehension and writing. But my pragmatics, that's going to help me to be a good understander, to be put two and two together, to be strategic about my listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So as we think about that, I want to share with you more research findings for English learners. These will also see in those IES practice guides. But we have done the work, and these studies were done over 15 years of work, but really demonstrating that we could make a difference if we worked early with students. For example, we did early interventions for Spanish-speaking students at risk for reading difficulties, and we saw these statistically significant results in literacy. And we added those 5 components of literacy, but the oral language proficiency and the scaffolds for English language. So we were working on language skills as we were working on literacy skills. We also did these studies in the Spanish language and also got significant results. Dr. Linnea Airy and her team also worked with students in the language minority students in the 1st grade who were struggling and also had statistically significant results. And these students not only had the opportunities to learn about literacy, but they focused on vocabulary and applying meaning, and they used those visual supports that were provided. So they got great outcomes as well. So what we added in our studies were literacy support activities to expand students' expressive language, receptive language, their vocabulary skills, gave them opportunities. And I'll talk about, we did some read alouds where they could retell. We front loaded whenever, there was going to be the directions or anything within the content of the lesson that would be challenging. We front loaded and taught that vocabulary and had those discussions about it. So we always wanted to meet their language needs as we were meeting their literacy needs. You remember in all those studies and all those national reports that says cross-linguistic features. So here what I'm providing you today with are some examples. The most common language of our English learners is Spanish. Look right here. Look at what's the same across the languages. Let's capitalize upon that. Look at that. B, k, d, g, o, m. Amazing. Guess what else? Not only can we capitalize upon these Spanish-speaking English learners, but let's look at the language of Arabic. Look at Arabic, the commonalities with English. B, d, k, o, m, j, o. Isn't that amazing? You see a lot of those sounds made with the 2 lips in both Arabic and in Spanish. Now let's look at Vietnamese, another common language of our students who are English learners in the United States. Once again, what do we see? B, d, o, m. We even see and s. So there's a website called mylanguages.org that has many, many languages that you can look up and see what's the same and what's different with the English language. That's how you can be informed. And this is what every educator who works with English learners, this is what you should know to capitalize upon those cross-linguistic features. That's being diagnostic and prescriptive with your students. So what's going to be challenging for them? Oh, those short vowel sounds. Ah, eh, the schwa sound. the sound of j, or the sound made with your tongue sticking out. It has two sounds, both voiced and unvoiced, which is just air and the sounds like sh and j and ah and those are challenging for our students who are learning English as their second language. So I'm going to give you some strategies. Here's some strategies, for example, between Spanish and English, making a connection. Oh my goodness, for my Spanish speakers, that letter J that says J is so challenging. What can you do about it? Well, guess what? They have the CH, that digraph CH in their language. Everyone put your hand on your vocal cords and say, your vocal cords didn't vibrate. Now say, but this time, make your vocal cords vibrate. Add voicing. J, j. Turn off your voice. Turn it on. J, j, j. Turn it off. Those are the same sounds. You've got them to a sound that was very challenging. Next challenging sound, the TH sound. Everyone stick out your tongue and say, with your voice box on. Wow, did you know in Spanish, whenever the students have the medial D in a word in Spanish, such as here's my finger, and the word for finger in Spanish is D-E-D-O. The first D sounds like the English one, D, de, but the second D is lo, de, lo. The D between two vowels is the English TH sound, voiced. So when children are writing father, F-A-D-E-R, you're going to say, good for you. You know the sound. You use D in your native language of Spanish for the sound, but in English we use TH. That English digraph, ooh, like in moon or boot, they're going to want to use the letter U. Boot, they're going to write B-U-T. And you're going to say, good for you. You got the sound, ooh, but in English we use O-O. The Spanish trilled R, we're going to have to soften that, right? But there's even a soft R in Spanish. So if I think about the word for face in Spanish is C-A-R-A, cara. Listen to how I said that, cara, cara. Did you know that that translates to the medial T and D in English between two vowels? Say a word like letter, ladder. And in Spanish, I'll say cara, hora. Your tongue flaps up and down. So the R of Spanish is the medial T and D of English. So they might want to write something like letter, L-E-R-E-R. And you're going to say, good for you. You got the sound down. But we're not going to use R in English. We're going to use that double T or that double D, like in ladder. Same thing with Arabic. Did you know Arabic doesn't have the sound, but Arabic does have the sound B. So what are you going to do? You're going to make the connections across those two. B, B, B. My voice box is on. Now say B with just air. Arabic doesn't have the sound, but guess what? It has the sound for the letter F. So the F and V are almost the same sounds. The only difference, my voice box is on for it. My voice box is off for it. So we can teach them that. There's also no initial S consonant blends. Oh, that's so troubling for Spanish speakers and Vietnamese speakers. So I tell them, show me your teeth only. Sprite, spaghetti. Don't open your mouth and give me a vowel. So we teach them about how to produce those sounds. The Vietnamese speakers mostly have one or two syllable words. And so English words with more than two syllables are challenging. Those consonant clusters are challenging. The new sounds are challenging, right? The ch is challenging, but could I get an approximation? Could I say sh, which is also voiceless, but it's stretched out, and tell them to say sh, but shorten it. Sh. Same thing with j, right? And j. As I'm working with our students on phonological awareness, what's really awesome is if they have this skill in their native language, they're also going to have this skill in their second language, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to teach those cross-linguistic connections. Remember, you saw that in those national reports. And students who have some phonological skills in their native language are likely to have strong phonological awareness skills in the second language. But here's what you're going to do different. Here's how you're going to differentiate the instruction on phonological awareness for English learners. Because we know that the connection, for example, between Spanish and reading and Spanish phonological awareness is 0.74. That's a high correlation. And between English phonological awareness and English reading is also high correlation. But when we look across languages, my goodness, if I have Spanish phonological awareness, I'm very likely to have English phonological awareness skills. 0.92, we're 0.08 off from it being perfect. Spanish word reading supports English word reading. But it goes both ways in a bi-directional fashion. My Spanish phonological awareness not only helps Spanish reading, but can help English reading. My English phonological awareness can help English reading, but also can help Spanish reading. But what are you going to do that's different? Here it is. So now, if my students already have phonological awareness in their native language, what I'm going to do, the Spanish language has about 22 phonemes. The English language has 44 phonemes. So English has double the number of phonemes than Spanish. It has 10 more phonemes than Arabic. So as we look at this, we're going to focus not only on phonological awareness, but on the new sound. So here's my new sound of j that I told you was problematic, challenging. So I'm going to have them do some phonological awareness activities. I'm not going to show them the pictures yet. We're just going to do it through auditory skill. Say the word ham, students. Change to j. What's your new word? Jam. Say the word bat. Change b to j. Adding j. What do we do? Jet. Say the word pig. Change p to j. Chig. Say the word hog. Change h to j. Jog. Nice work. Now let's focus on the meanings of these words. You said jam. I'm going to show you a picture now of jam. That's strawberry jam. I'm going to put it on my toasted bread. You said the word jet. That's like an airplane. It flies in the sky to get you somewhere very quickly. Jet. Ooh, look at the jig. When I go fishing, I'm going to use this jig. You said the word jog. It's running at a slow and steady pace, as you see right there in that picture. So we've got some new words, jam, jet, jig, jog. But you also manipulated that first sound and you changed it to your new sound, j. Good job. So we're going to focus on the new sound of j, and we're going to make connections in just a moment to the letters and then meanings. So here's my connection. Listen as I say these words with the same sound. Jam, jog, jet. What sound did you hear, students? That's right. You heard j. Let me write the words. Jam, jog, jet. See the words there? Each one starts with the letter J, and our sound is j. Look at my picture. This is going to be my keyword, jaguar. And that's going to help you remember the sound j. Do you recognize this letter J in your language? Do you have it in your language? Yes. How do you say it in your language? Do you have this jaguar word in your language? Yeah. Jaguar. Well, in Spanish, in English, the sound is j. Let's use the word jaguar in a sentence. The jaguar can run very fast. Let's say the letter name, J. What's our keyword? Jaguar. What's our new sound? J. Now we're going to write the letter, and we're going to also be reading words with this letter. So I linked my phonological awareness to my letter sound knowledge. And then I'm going to teach them how to read. And we're going to look at these 6 syllable types of the English language. I don't have to know this in Spanish because the vowel sounds never change. There's only 5 vowels. The reason you have to know this in English is to know which vowel sound to say. So here's a vowel followed by at least one consonant. Consonants close your mouth when you produce them, so we call it a closed syllable. The vowel is going to be short. So in English, I say 10. In Spanish, I say 10. And that means it doesn't mean the number 10. We also have the open syllable. That means your vowels open the mouth. So we call it an open syllable because it ends in a vowel. And the vowel is going to be long. So the first example, the vowel is going to be short. The second example is going to be long. No. In Spanish, no. They mean the same thing. We have that vowel consonant E. Teachers in first grade do a very good job of teaching this. So we have to learn that the E is silent, dame. But in Spanish, I would say dame. It means give it to me. The vowel pair syllable, we're going to have to remember that rule. When two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. It's not reliable. You have to teach each of these vowel pairs. So here I'm going to say I for pie. In Spanish, I'm going to say pie. It means foot, not something that's like a dessert. So we have to teach what's different. Mar in Spanish will mean the beach. Mar in English, it's not trill. The final stable syllables like bull, pull, tool. Here we have the word que, bull, in Spanish cable. They mean the same thing, but they're pronounced differently. So I can see these same patterns in the language of Spanish, but the rules are different because in English, they really tell us about what kind of vowel sound we're going to have. In Spanish, the vowels never change, so they don't really give us any additional information. So we don't teach these patterns in Spanish, but we should in English. All right, so we did phonological awareness. We did our letter sound correlation. We learned about the syllable type. In this case, we learned about the closed syllable. So now we're going to do some reading, and each of these words has one vowel followed by at least one consonant, and that vowel sound is going to be short. We call that closed syllable. So let me have you prepare and read the first words on the first row. So the students would read jam, jet, jig, jab, jam. Let's read it again with fluency. Jam, jet, jig, jab, jam. Students, now I'm going to bring in language. Students, as you look at these words on the first row, which words not only have the sound j, but the sound ah? And the students would read jam, jab, jan. Nice work, students. Next row, prepare it. Remember what kind of vowel sounds we're going to have. If you want to code with a breve, which means short, that's fine. Let's read. Jim, jog, jack, Jen, just. Read it with fluency to me, students. Jim, jog, jack, Jen, just. I have a question about these words. I want to know which ones in this second row are persons' names. And they would read Jim, Jack, Jen. Which word on the second row could mean someone's work? That's right, job. I like the way you paid attention to the meaning of these words. Let's prepare the next row. Ready? Read. Jet, jig, jan, jack, jab. Read it with fluency. Jet, jig, jan, jack, jab. Students, I want to know about the function of some of these words, the grammar. Can you tell me which word can be a noun, a verb, and an adjective? That's right, jet. We went on the jet, which was the airplane. When we're done with class today, we're going to jet out of here. You're going to go quickly. And I have jet black hair. You're describing my hair color. That acts as an adjective. Good job. Now we'll read the last row. Just, jam, jig, jab, jet. With fluency, just, jam, jig, jab, jet. Now I want to talk about the use. If I wanted to say the phrase, I was only kidding, what word could you use? Just. I was just kidding. Very good. If I'm going to go and hang out with my friends and we're going to listen to the music, we're going to what to the music? Jam to the music. I taught you about strawberry jam, but now we're using it like a verb. Jam to the music. Good job. So here I brought in phonology, vocabulary, grammar into my decoding practice. I was focused on language while I was focused on reading. We also know that students that are English learners will need some work on fluency. And please know that they're going to learn how to code. But you cannot assume that their reading fluency is going to improve their reading comprehension. They're going to need extra work on phrasing, expression, vocabulary, or language. And know that reading fluency and comprehension is moderated by oral language proficiency of the English learners. So as we look here, yes, they're going to need help with that phrasing. And here's an example of pencil swings. They've learned that letter J, they learn NG, they learn that letter Z. They've been talking about the jobs that people do. And as we look here, I want them to learn about the phrasing. So I use pencil swings. Jim makes rings for his job. I can also teach them about stress. Let's stress Jim, the noun. Jim makes rings for his job. Or let's stress the verb. Jim makes rings for for his job. See how that subtly can change the emphasis and the meaning. So as we practice here, we're going to practice that phrasing that my students who are English learners will need. And we're going to do the repeated readings, right? So reading for accuracy and for fluency, and then we're going to read for comprehension. And I'm going to teach you a strategy for comprehension. But one of the things I want to talk to you about for vocabulary is 2 excellent word learning strategies for English learners include cognate awareness and morphological awareness. Those are the 2 best evidence-based practices. So let's make some connections. What's a cognate? It's a word that's the same across languages, same in, it looks very similar, might be same in spelling and in meaning. So look at the word canoe. Let's compare that. And looks, it's the same in English and Catalan, but in Spanish or Italian or Portuguese, canoa, in French, in German. But we've been studying about occupations this week. Let's look at some cognates. Carpintero, carpenter, arquitecto, architect, artista, artist, dentista, dentist, doctor, autor, author. But let me be explicit and systematic. The word is author in English. Say the word to me, author. The Spanish word is autor. How many syllables in that word? Put your hand under your chin, autor. Your mouth open 2 times, that's 2 syllables. How about in English? Author, it's also 2. How many sounds in Spanish? Out, or, 4. How about in English? Only 3. How many meaning units? Only 1. But if I added S to it, authors, that would be more than 1. That would be 2. Let's discuss the meaning of this word, author, someone who wrote something, right? Let's compare it with an architect. Can you describe that to me in a sentence? How are they the same? How are they different? Can the word author also be used as a verb? Maybe if I said, he authored a book. Let's use it in a sentence. I am the author of a book. I authored my first book. How are they the same in spelling? They're almost the same, except in English we have that H. So what I want to show you right here is that I used language. Phonology was where I started. How many syllables? How many sounds? Vocabulary and meaning. What does the word mean? How many morphemes? Morphology, right? Syntax, can we use it as a verb? Can you use it as a noun? Pragmatics, can you use it as a sentence? Orthography, can you tell me the differences in the spelling? Right here, once again, just like I did in reading, I did phonology, vocabulary, semantics, morphology, syntax, pragmatics, and then I added spelling. That is the system that I'm using throughout. And guess what happens to the students? They start to think in that way. I can do the same thing with this excellent word strategy of morphemes. Look how many are the same. 60% of the English language comes from Latin. Wow. Anti, ex, audi, phono, ista, ist, itis, itis. Just like I did the cognates, I can do the same exact procedure with the morphemes. Say these words after me. Artist, pianist, dentist. What did you notice? At the end of the word, it ended in ist. That's a suffix. Let's look at these words. How did we spell ist? I-S-T. Do you have any of these words in your language? Yeah, artista, pianista, dentista. Oh, you say ista. If you draw pictures, you're considered an artist. If you play the piano, you're a pianist. If you fix someone's aching tooth, you're a dentist. So what might it mean, ist? Oh, the person who or the thing that. Can you think of other words with ist at the end? If you like to arrange flowers for a living, you are a florist. If you play the guitar very well, you're considered a guitarist. If you're someone who provides therapy, you're a therapist. Any of these words in your language? Yeah, florista, guitarista, terapista. We can create a word wall, and we're going to add this to, and we can be thinking as we listen to people speak or as we read, we can continue to add these. So 2 great word learning strategies, morphology and cognates. We'll end today with thinking about reading comprehension. In the National Reading Panel report, it talked about comprehension monitoring and cooperative learning. Also talked about story structure and using organizers, question answering, question generation, summarization, and multiple strategies. So what I did is I created an easy way to help me remember to embed these strategies. It's called 3PV, 3RQ. And let me tell you what the P's stand for. The first P starts with the purpose, and I start with the purpose in mind to get my students focused and attending to the task at hand. Preparing a connection really helps to explore that background knowledge. What do they already know? And what do they need to know to front load to get them to understand the passage? The next P is the prediction. Can they make a prediction and see if their prediction comes true? Those are my 3 Ps. V would be vocabulary. Are there going to be any words that they need to know, right? That will help them to understand the passage. Then I have 3 R's. They're going to read, and I have them read for accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. I'm going to review with them what they've read, and then I'm going to have them retell. In one of our studies, we left out the retell, and we didn't get as great as results as leaving it in. So let's leave in that retell. And then we have the Q. Remember what we found out from the National Reading Panel. Question answering and question generation. And we're going to use these multiple strategies, 3PV, 3RQ. And I took that from the National Reading Panel report, but I put it into a kind of a way that I could do my lessons and lesson plans. So remember that passage that we were looking at that the students were going to read and we were going to practice the fluency? I can bring in 3PV, 3RQ, even to this practice for their decoding and comprehension. So we're going to start with the purpose, the first P. Students, today you're going to read a passage. Remember this week that you learned that letter J. What sound does it say? J. You also learned NG. What sound does it say? You also learned Z. What sound does it say? Z. And the R in English, make the sound R. With that letter R. Very good. We've also been talking all week about occupations, what people do. So let's look at the title, artisans. Let's look at what it has there, A-R-T. What does that spell? Art. Do any of you know anything about art? What makes something, what do you think something is that's art? Students might say painting, or they might say making a ceramic, or they might say a sculpture, right? We also look at the ending, an, artisan. If I say musician, that's someone who makes music. So artisan, what do you think that might be? That's right, person who makes art. If it has a suffix S, is it one person or more than one person? More than one. So what would you predict artisans this passage is going to be about? That's right, perhaps about persons who create art. So let's get ready to read. Oh, before we get ready to read, I do have a vocabulary word that I want to explore with you. And the word is content. I want you to put your hand under your chin, and I want you to put the emphasis, open your mouth wider for the second syllable, content. I'm content with your work. That means I'm happy, I'm satisfied. But if I open my mouth wider for the first syllable, content, say it like that, content, it changes in the meaning. It means your things or your belongings. So we're going to use in this passage, content. You're going to open your mouth wider for the second syllable. It means you're happy, you're satisfied. So let's read about who's happy and satisfied. Ready? Prepare the first sentence. Ready? Read. Jim makes rings for his job. Nice. Next sentence. The rings are for men and women. Good reading. Next sentence. Jim rubs the rings with the cloth. Ready? Read for decoding. Jim is content with his rings. Next sentence. Zach is an artist. Next, Zach makes red pots with zigzags. Can you make a zigzag in the air? Good job. Zach is content. There's that word content with his red pots. Next sentence, Ren sings songs for his job. Ren sings songs at the zoo. Nice work. Now we'll practice with our pencil swings, and that would be what I would do. Practice with them on the phrasing, and then they read it one more time for comprehension. All right, so I have them read, then I review with them. All right, the story was about Jim, and he was making some what? Rings for his job. And the rings were for men and who else? And it said he was content with his rings, which means he was happy. Then it talked about Zach. And what was he? An artist. And what did he make? Red pots. With what? Zigzags. And it said he was content with his red pots. Then it talked about Ren. And he sings songs for his job. And he sings songs at the zoo. Now I want you to turn to your partner and I want you to retell this passage in your own words to your partner. So that solidifies their language, solidifies their understanding, solidifies their vocabulary, solidifies the content of what they've read. Then we ask questions. What is Jim's job? If he makes rings, a fancy word for making rings would be a jeweler. We've been talking about that. Why do you think he rubs the ring with a cloth? That's right, to make them shiny so he can sell them. What does Zach do? He's an artist. What does he make? Pots. And what color are the pots that he makes? They're red. What do they have on them? Zigzags. Where does Ren sing his songs? At the zoo. Do you think Ren is content? Because it said Jim is content and Zach is content, but it didn't say anything about Ren. All right, now I want you to generate a question. I want you to generate a question with why or how. It begins with why or how. So they might come up with something like, how does Jim make those rings? Why does Jim rub the rings? Right? Why did Zach put zigzag? Or how does Zach make red pots? So that was not only answering questions, but generating. So that was 3PV, 3RQ. In our sessions that we work with students, we bring in read alouds for the students so that they can work and listen to books that are above their reading level. We use the books throughout the week where we preview the book with the students, we look at the vocabulary, we read to them, we scaffold for their language, and we guide the questioning and the discussion. So and just the students can understand what they've read, what it's about. And I also bring in some of these books in native language to make connections. But by giving them these read alouds, and by the way, we did this in upper elementary and middle school too, in science and social studies classrooms. And when we brought in these read alouds, it really did solidify their understanding of key content that they needed to learn. And we expanded their world knowledge, we expanded their vocabulary. And this was essential. And so don't forget how valuable read alouds can be for exploring various cultures and topics and expanding their world knowledge, their word knowledge, and their comprehension. So when you teach English learners, the message I wanted to give you today is be knowledgeable about what's the same, what's different, what can you capitalize upon from their native language to the second language of English, and how can you keep tabs on their language development and their literacy development so that you are always thinking about language goals and literacy goals as you work with the students. Bring in those cross-linguistic features of the language because that implements and brings in those word learning strategies for them. So here's some resources: MTS4Ls, dyslexiaida.org, Coloring Colorado, where there's a bunch of webinars for English learners, the Meadow Center at UT, which has like top 10 things to do. And recently at the University of Houston, we have the Center for the Success of English Learners, ccellcenter.org, and it's for adolescent English learners. And that project just got off the ground this past school year. I also have a book, Literacy Foundations for English Learners, where you can learn more about structured literacy for English learners. And here are some references. So your language supports your literacy, and your literacy supports your language. Literacy is the bridge to equity. So you are a language teacher, you are a literacy teacher, and by bringing in these features, you're building that equity for our students. Be prepared to teach every student, including these students from diverse populations. Thank you so much.